Well, I've tried to put together better presentations. I've increased the frequency of my emails. I send them really long emails with detailed explanations. And in most cases, they're actually making the problem worse. Welcome to Life of a CISO. I'm Dr. Eric Cole, your host, and we'll be taking you on a journey each week on what it takes to be a CISO and what are solutions that you can implement today if you are currently a Chief Information Security Officer or if you want to be one in the future. This is Life of a CISO. Welcome. I hope you know what time it is. I know what time it is. It's time for Life of a CISO with yours truly, Dr. E is in the house. And today we're going to talk about what everybody needs, but nobody knows they need it. One of the things I find so fascinating in being a coach and a leader for Chief Information Security Officers is when people come to me, it's because they often have a problem and they think they know what they want to fix the problem. But so often, it's never what they want that fixes the issue. It's always what they need that they're never aware of. And the reason is this. Most of us, when we're looking at a problem or an issue that we have, is we're looking at the symptoms of the problem. So for example, one of the number one things that people come to me with, whether they're a new CISO or an existing CISO, is, hey, Eric, I don't get enough time with the executives. I don't have enough time with the executives. And I'm like, well, what have you tried? And this I love. I always love when people come and say, I've tried everything. You've tried everything? So I'm always a little funny, a little snarky with that. I'm like, so have you kidnapped their puppy? And they said, no. Like, have you crazy glued them in their office and not allowed them out unless they talk to you? They're like, no. Did you take the tires off their car so they couldn't leave? And then they had to spend 40 minutes with you as you put the tires back on the car? And they're looking at me like I'm crazy. I'm like, so you haven't tried everything, right? You might have tried some things, but let's be clear. If in any situation, especially if you're a CISO, if you tried everything, you would have solved the problem. Because there is no such thing as an unsolvable problem, right? Every problem is unsolvable. It's just most people believe a problem is unsolvable because they have a very limited set of solutions. Now, yes, the limited set of solutions you have at your disposal might render that problem unsolvable. But the trick is you need to get more solutions. You need to figure out more ways to solve that issue. So when I always go in and ask them about, okay, how are you trying to solve this problem? In almost all cases, it's symptoms. Well, I've tried to put together better presentations. I've increased the frequency of my emails. I send them really long emails with detailed explanations. And in most cases, they're actually making the problem worse because the root cause issue is they don't understand the fundamentals of communication. And that's what we're going to talk about today, my friends, is communication. I have a theory that is actually even more than a theory because I think it's pretty close to factual. But whether you're talking about work, friends, kids, spouses, relationships, business, anything out there, all problems are created by improper communication, and all problems are solved by proper communication. Now, I know I'm careful because I'm using the word all, but I truly believe that. Because the reason why people get into problems, issues, conflicts is because they don't understand each other. They're not communicating correctly. Now, yes, you could get into a situation where we just might see differently. But if proper communication was used, we would say, okay, I clearly see your standpoint and understand. And the other person says, and I see your point and understand. Now, we don't have to agree, but we could just sort of agree to disagree that, hey, you're right from your perspective, I'm right from mine, and how we can still peacefully coexist, even though we might have different views of the world. So that's the power of communication. I'm not saying communication, and this is one that I get very frustrated with a lot of the books and seminars and mentors that people give on communication, because often people confuse communication with manipulation. A lot of these are, oh, I can teach you how to convince somebody to do anything you want. Great. That's manipulation, my friends. That's not communication. Communication is two-way, where the sole objective of communication is understanding. Let me say that again. The sole objective of communication is not for you to get your way, is not for the other person to do whatever it is you want. It's for the two parties to sit there and completely understand each other and completely understand each other's perspective. And then from that standpoint, you can then respect each other and figure out an appropriate solution. But what everybody misses is, if that initial component of rapport, where you have an understanding and respect that has to be built through communication, you're never, ever going to get to a point where you have total and complete agreement. The reason why you see people agree to things, agree to contracts, agree to whatever, and then change their mind, and you sit there and go, how could that happen? And you might have seen this if you're a CISO or a security engineer, where you've been in a meeting and you agree to something, and you know that both parties agreed to it. And then you come back a few days later and they're like, no, I changed my mind, or, oh, I didn't agree to that. And you're like, how could that have happened? It's because you never communicated. You both basically just said words, but there was never rapport and understanding. And that's why it fell apart. Because if the 2 or 3 or 4, however number of people had understanding and rapport, and you made an agreement, it would be long-standing. People only change their mind because there was never the understanding, rapport, and respect built in the first place. So that's the piece that if you want to be a world-class CISO, you need to work on. And it's all about the power of the words you say. So one of the short stories I heard, and it's a great way to illustrate this, and it illustrates so many points, is there's a monastery where when a monk goes to the monastery, they take a vow of silence. They're not allowed to speak anything for 12 months. Then, at the end of 12 months, they're only allowed to say 2 words. That's it. So there's this monk that joins the monastery, doesn't speak for an entire year. And they call him in after a year and say, you've earned your 2 words. And his 2 words are bed, uncomfortable. And then he goes off. And he goes another year without speaking any words. And then 2 years later, they bring him back. And they say, okay, you've earned your 2 words. And his 2 words are food, horrible. And he goes off. And another year passes, 3 years. And they call him in and say, okay, you get your 2 words. And his 2 words are, I quit. You know what the chief of the monastery said? No wonder you're quitting, because all you ever say are negative things and complaints. So, a couple morals to the story. When you say less, people listen more. The monk only said 2 words a year. So those words became very, very powerful. Second, people see patterns very quickly in how you talk and how you operate. So in this case, even though it was only 2 words over a 3-year period, everything the monk said was negative. Everything that came out of their mouth was negative. That was only 4 words, right? But it was still negative. So the point is, be careful and use your words in a powerful manner. So back to that example. Many CISOs go in and they try to over-explain. They try to say way too much. When I sit there and I coach CISOs, or I sit in when they brief the executives, I typically like to sit behind the execs, but visual from the CISO. So the CISO's in front, the execs are facing them, and I'm behind. So the execs can't see me, but I can do sign language and stuff. And the thing that I'm finding more often, I'm like, stop talking. You're over explaining and losing your audience, right? Short and sweet. What if you had to explain? And once again, it's a good exercise. I'm not saying do this all the time, but it's a great CISO exercise. What if you had to explain everything to the execs in 10 words or less? How would you do it? How would you put in place? Because here's the thing that everybody misunderstands about communication. The less you communicate, the harder it is. I forget which president it was, but one of the presidents of the United States got a call and said, it's from a prestige college, and said, we'd like you to give the keynote at our upcoming commencement ceremony. And the president said, I am really, really busy, so I'm not going to have enough time to prep. So it depends on how much time I have to speak. And they said, well, how much would you like? He goes, if you give me 45 minutes, I can present. If the speech has to be under 5 minutes, it's going to take way too long to prep, and I won't be able to give the commencement speech. And that's contrary to what a lot of people think, because most people think a 5-minute speech is easier than a 45-minute. But the reality is it's the opposite. Because if I only have 5 minutes, I have to get the same amount out in less time. If I have 45 minutes, you can go on and on and on and on and eventually get to where you need to go. But the trick is, world-class CISOs are masters at laser communication. Boom. That's the thing that people always say about me. When I sit in boardrooms, and I have other board members always comment on this going, Eric, you speak the least amount out of everybody. But when you open your mouth, everybody pays attention. Everybody puts down their phone. Nobody is doing anything else but listening, because they know from experience that if you're going to talk, you are only going to talk if you have something very important and valuable, and you've thought through it, and it's going to be very laser and specific. That's world-class CISO. So we'll help you out. Number one challenge people have is, I can't get a meeting with the executives. I'm a chief officer, and I need to meet with the other chief officers, but they never have time to meet. And the solution they think is over-communicate. The real solution is this: under-communicate. Send them an email with the title, Cybersecurity is Critical to the Business. And then in the body of the email say, what is one question that you have on cybersecurity that I can answer for you? You'd be surprised. You're going to get a much better chance of getting a response. One of my favorite things to do in a board meeting, and I'll sometimes do it before, I'll sometimes do it during, but I will ask the chairman of the board, what is one thing that if I cover in cybersecurity in this meeting would make this the best presentation you ever had on cybersecurity? Boom. That is powerful communication, my friends. That is taking control of the situation. So world-class executives, world-class chief officers, and world-class chief information security officers are masters of communication. Yet here's the issue. Most of us were never trained. Most of us were never told, and most of us were told that talking is better. Now let's break down a couple of the core fundamentals of communication. First, the goal of communication is to build rapport so both sides understand each other and there's a level of respect. So you ask yourself, what is the quickest, fastest way to achieve those three goals? What's going to be the best way to do that? And one of the best ways of doing that is one of my other favorite quotes. And so many people take credit for this quote, and I don't know who really originated it, but the quote is, the way to get what you want is to help other people get what they want. So the way I always like starting communication when I'm a CISO is understanding what's the biggest pain point of the person I'm communicating with. Now here's the craziest thing. We all recognize that, yes, if I can go in and understand what their pain point is and solve it or give them solutions or help them fix it, that's a good win-win. But nobody ever stops to figure out what that is. And I love it. I was actually giving a keynote about 2,500 CISOs. And somebody said, Eric, loved your presentation. Great presentation. But how do you do that? How do you actually figure out their pain point? And I looked at him and I smirked a little. And I said, did you ever think to ask? And they're like, you just ask them? What a concept. Why not? And it's funny because people are like, I can't do it. Wait a second. You can't walk into a board meeting. You can't look at the CEO and say, what is your current biggest pain point in cybersecurity? Why? It is so simple. It is so powerful. It is so engaging. So why is it that we miss the obvious? Like, this always cracks me up. Everyone always goes in and goes, Eric, I want to know your secret. How come you're so effective in front of the board? How come executives love to talk to you? And it's simple. I always ask questions to understand their problem. I listen, and then I deliver solutions to their problem. I am basically, I don't know what you like, and there's so many these days. I don't take any painkillers, but I'm CISOs, world-class CISOs are aspirin, ibuprofen, Advil to the executive's headaches. That's how you look at your job. I'll say that again. A world-class CISO is the cyber aspirin to the executive's headaches in cybersecurity. Wow. Right? If that's how you approached every meeting, you would never, ever, ever have a problem meeting with the executives. And that's why I can show up in LA or New York City and walk in to the C-suite of many of my clients unannounced, and I can have a conversation with the CEO or COO in 5 minutes or less, because their executive assistants know that I always am a benefit and solve a problem to their boss, and their bosses always know that time with Eric is worth every penny. So if I pop in and say, hey, can I speak to Sally or Bob for 5 minutes? They will always make time between their meetings because I'm always providing value to them. This is the switch. We're trained and brought up that communication is about getting what we want. Communication is about convincing the other person what they want. Just think of all the times when you get into fights or arguments with people, it's always because you're trying to push your agenda on other people. What if you flipped it? What if you said, how can I help you? How can I assist you? It looks like you're having a difficult day. What can I do to make your day easier? Right? It's all in the power of communication. So a couple communication tricks. First, I don't think it's a coincidence that humans have 2 ears and 1 mouth. I think it's a very, very powerful lesson and reminder to us. The reason why we're given 2 ears and 1 mouth, maybe it's because we should listen twice as much as we speak. So first rule of being a world-class communicator, which is required to be a world-class CISO. Listen more than you speak. Listen more than you try to just talk words or push agendas on people. Second, understand the other person's pain. Understand the other person's perspective. And the best way to do that is to ask questions. Continually ask questions to understand where they're coming from, what's important to them, and build that rapport. And then come up with ways or solutions to solve their problems. Because if you are a CISO, that every time you meet with an executive, it always goes this way. We identify a problem, and you help solve it, and you leave the meeting. Just like that monk with the 2 words. They could be 5-minute meetings. They could be 45-second meetings. But if every time you meet, when you leave, that executive is like, wow, I just solved the problem, or I minimized the pain of a problem, or I have more options for that problem. If you're known for that, do you think you would ever have a problem getting meetings with executives? No. So remember, world-class CISOs are world-class communicators, and world-class communicators are very laser-focused in their speech. They say very little, but when they do, it is a laser that cuts through anything. So if you want to be a world-class CISO, Make sure you continue to focus and work on those communication skills, because that's the magic that's going to take your career to the next level.